Hey boys and girls, it's me again, Mrs. Ziegler, here to present lesson 20 of our unit, Hurricanes. So we're still talking about the novel, My Louisiana Sky, and we're just going to discuss it briefly before we move on to the remainder of our lesson. As always, we want to review first. So in lesson 9, we learned how figurative language in My Louisiana Sky reveals how Tiger develops, how she grows. We learned about the change that Tiger experienced in that story and how she changed from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. We also analyzed how Tiger changed as a result of the hurricane and how that hurricane impacted her life and changed it for what I consider the better. At the beginning of the chapter, we know that that Tiger had a problem with her parents, her mom and her dad. We learned how she kind of wanted to leave and be more like Aunt Dora Kay. And at the end of the chapter, we learned how she appreciated her family more and became more confident in herself, which is always a good thing. All right, so we're going to move on. Let's prepare. So today we will learn about oral histories and determine how oral histories impact what we know about an event. So I want to pause there for just a moment because I want us to look at these words, oral histories. So remember, anytime we're trying to figure out a term that we're not familiar with, think about context clues and background knowledge. Do you guys know what it means to say something orally or to do something orally? So that means that you are speaking it, that you are actually talking about it. We know that histories is things that happen in the past. So we're going to learn about that today. We're also going to read, watch, and listen to the oral histories of hurricane survivors. And we're going to take notes to keep track of the sequence of events and the information that we learn. For this assignment, you guys will need 4 copies of a first-hand account organizer, your writing techniques, evidence charts. All right, so we're going to read. While we are reading about our first-hand account, we're going to write down the key events in the middle rows and write details about the events in the bubbles that are above the arrows. And I'm going to show you guys what that chart will look like. If you are listening to an account, I want you to pause mentally because, of course, you don't have the computer in front of you where you can pause your computer and then take notes. So I want you to make a mental pause in your head and think about the event that you just read. Think about how important that event was in the story. And also consider whether or not that's an event that you need to write down and take extra time to relate to. Also, you're going to share information with your group or your partner, whoever you're at home with, and add to your organizer when you are finished. All right, so for this particular part, it asks us to start with your assigned first station. Of course, we're not in the classroom, so you guys are not going to be able to move from group to group. So instead, we're going to read one account together as a class. This account is going to be one based on a lady named Barbara and her mother. You guys are going to listen, read, and watch this first-hand account, take notes, of course, and then it would ask us to rotate to our next section, but we're only going to look at that first account. All right, you guys, so the oral history or account that we're going to listen to today is about a lady named Barbara. So this is the oral history that she's provided for us, her own story, and I'm going to read it to you guys. While I'm reading, make sure that you pay attention to it. It begins by saying, "My mother never did leave during a hurricane. We'd figure we'd go ride it out, and my sister was going to stay in Boonton in Gently because we have a duplex there. And we thought we were safe that morning, and my mother and I were eating breakfast, and all of a sudden we heard a rushing sound. We were like, what in the world is this? When we looked down, the water was bubbling up through the floor. When we ran to the door, it was a river. So I called 911, and they told us to try to get on the roof. And I called my sister, and all she could say was that the water had risen where she was also. And then the phone went dead. And that was the only communication we had. That was Monday morning, and we didn't get out until Wednesday morning. I think either that Wednesday or Thursday morning, because I would come out and sit on the porch, and we thought we were the only ones in the neighborhood. And that duplex over there, that's where people were, and we saw them. We were hollering to them across the way, and they told us to come over, but neither one of us could swim, and we didn't have a boat. And so we simply sat outside where I put my mother's wheelchair on the porch. A boat came by. It was the National Guard, and they picked us up and brought us right down to the bridge. They dropped us off and we waited for a bus, a school bus. But they didn't tell us where we were going. They put us on the bus and and somebody came and whispered to the bus driver in his ear and he takes off. When he's on his way, I asked him, where are we going? And he says, I can't tell you right now, but I will let you know that we should be headed to the Cajun Dome. But y'all don't want to go there. So I asked him if he could drop us off. Well, people didn't want to stop. And I said, well, we need to make a stop. So he stopped. So when I knew that we had crossed over from Baton Rouge to Port Allen, he stopped at the gas station and I dragged my mother off the bus with her walker because we couldn't bring her wheelchair. And from there, we walked to Days Inn and sat there until they had a room available. After a few hours, she came and said they had a room. We were like, thank you, Jesus. So I want you guys to think about that text. Think about what she said in this text. We learned about first person point of view a while ago, so I want you guys to think about that, how first person point of view allows you the opportunity to really understand what the writer is talking about because it is in first-hand account, which means this is their story. They're able to tell you exactly how they felt in the midst of all of this. All right, so now let's discuss. At the end of this unit, you will write about an experience with a hurricane. How will oral histories help you develop your narrative? So let's think about the oral history that we just read about with the story with Barbara. How could that help you understand an experience that you may have during a hurricane? We know that she talked about being frightened. We know she talked about being worried about whether someone else was around. She talked about how the water rushed in. We know from inferences that she had to have been very scared, especially when the phone hung up with her sister and her sister said that they were experiencing the same thing. We learned about how she went through the hurricane, how her and her mother survived and they were able to make it to a Days Inn. So all of those personal experiences that she felt will be able to help you guys when you have to write a similar story about an experience that you've had or that someone close to you has had during a hurricane. All right, we're going to add oral histories to your writing techniques evidence chart. Now I want us to think about why authors use firsthand accounts in their writing. So I want us to think about those words, firsthand accounts. So a firsthand account is very, very similar to first person point of view. And a firsthand account, that means that the person who actually experienced something is the one telling the story. What pronouns do you think that person would use? Do you think they would say he did this and she did this, they did that? Or do you think they would use personal pronouns such as I, me, my, us, we? If you guys guessed that they would use the second set of pronouns, then you're absolutely correct. When a story is being told in first-hand account, that means that that's someone's personal experience. If you turn to one of your family members right now, you explain to them what you did last night, then that's a first-hand account. If that family member goes and tells another person, then that is known as second-hand account because the story is not theirs. They're not going to be able to use personal pronouns like I, me, and my. They would have to use pronouns such as she, him, them, or they. So make sure you guys understand that. Why do we think personal pronouns being in first-hand accounts are so important? With those first-hand accounts, we're able to know exactly what somebody experienced. If you tell your story, if you explain what you did yesterday or what you did when you went outside or even your experience during this whole coronavirus thing, then that's your experience. No one else can present your experience the way you can. You can talk about how you felt. You can talk about your experience. You can talk about the things and the thoughts that went through your mind. No one else can give that information for you. So a first-hand account is very important because it allows us to experience that with the person that is telling the story. So I hope you guys keep that in mind. All right, I have a short video that I want you guys to watch that talks a little bit more about first-hand accounts, and it also introduces you guys to second-hand accounts. So pay attention as you look at that video.
Today, we are going to compare and contrast different accounts of the same event. Merriam-Webster. If you were telling a story to a friend about a car accident you saw on the way to school, you would be giving a first-hand account. Sometimes this is called an eyewitness account. If you were telling your friend about the same car accident, but your information came from a newspaper article that you read, then you are relaying the story secondhand. But how can you tell for sure? Here are some clues you can look for when you are trying to decide if what you are reading or watching is a first or second-hand account. Really focus on the pronouns. Is the author talking about himself or other people? Consider the source. Is what you are watching based on the author's personal experience or research that she conducted? Something to look and listen for are facts versus observations. If you hear a lot of information about times, dates, places, with no mention of how people are thinking or feeling, it's a pretty good clue that you are watching a second-hand account. Finally, try to decide where you might read or watch this story. Would it be on someone's blog or in their diary? That's a first-hand account. If you think you would see the story on the news or perhaps on Facebook, then you are most likely getting your information from a second-hand account. You might want to pause this video so you can jot down this table in your reading journal so you can use it through the rest of this video. Let's give it a try. We are going to watch clips from the video I found about Hurricane Katrina on YouTube. Think about the clues we talked about or look at your notes in your reading journal as we watch this clip.
On August 25th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina passed over southern Florida. It's difficult to estimate. 2 days later, the hurricane was heading toward New Orleans and the coast.
Do you think this clip was a first-hand account or a second-hand account? You got it, second-hand. This is a news report. We saw maps and heard facts about where the storm was landing. This is definitely a second-hand account. Here's another clip. See if you can tell the difference.
Thank you.
Did you notice how in this clip we didn't see maps or hear facts? We heard people who were telling us about what they took with them and how they planned to get away from the storm. This is a first-hand account. Let's look at one more clip. Watch carefully and jot down in your reading journal what you notice.
The same day Katrina hit, the levee in the Ozark Lake concentrate breached, and 80% of New Orleans was underwater.
Well, when Katrina first struck, I thought it would be as long as a couple of days, but it turned out to be a little bit longer. I thought it was just a lot of plans. And we were only given school for we just knew that the first part of this clip is a second-hand account. We got a report about the levee breaking and how much of the city was flooded. In the second part, we hear a girl telling how she realized that her plans for her senior year of high school were going to change a lot. That's a first-hand account. A first-hand account of a story adds context and emotion to a story. A second-hand account tells the facts and higher-level details. Okay, let's try with one more example, this time with a written account. Your job is to read a short excerpt of an article I found on History.com. Remember.
All right, so with this particular excerpt, I just want to read the first few lines to you guys, and I want you to think about whether or not this excerpt is being presented in a first-hand account or a second-hand account. So it says, by the time Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans early in the morning on Monday, August 29th, it had already been raining heavily for hours. When the storm surge as high as 9 meters in some places arrived, it overwhelmed many of the city's unstable levees and drainage canals. Water seeped through the soil underneath some levees and swept others away altogether. So let's think about this. Do we see any personal pronouns such as I, me, my? Do you think that this story is someone's personal experience, or is this just a story that someone else is telling you guys? If you guess that this is a story that someone else is telling you guys, it's not their personal experience, then you guessed correct. So would that be first-hand account or second-hand account? Definitely second-hand account.
You are looking for the pronouns that are used and if there are personal interest stories or facts. Pause this video to take the time that you need to read the excerpt. Here are some of the facts I jotted down. Do your notes match mine? I also noted that there were specific references to places, and while we don't see a map, we certainly could find these places if we looked at one. All of these clues tell me this is a second-hand account. Do you agree? Now you have some practice picking out details that help you analyze the differences between first and second-hand accounts of the same event.
All right, you guys, so I hope y'all enjoyed that video, and I hope that it helped you with your understanding of the difference between first-hand and second-hand accounts. So now we are going to close with lesson 10. In this lesson, you guys listen to first-hand accounts from hurricane survivors. The particular hurricane survivor that we're talking about was Barbara and her mom, of course, and them getting out and being able to make it to Baton Rouge to a hotel. And we also learned how to organize information and take notes on written accounts and oral histories. I hope that you guys are staying safe. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. I can't wait to see you guys again. Have a great day.